Flirties, welcome to this brand new episode of Flirtations, all about the science and practice of optimism. Can we practice being happy? What do you think about that? If you have any doubts, stick around. By the end of this episode, I guarantee you're at least going to have fewer doubts, as I know dating and relationships are not easy. It's going to bring up a lot of stuff. We may feel lonely or alone at times, get frustrated, overwhelmed, feel the despair, the hopelessness. Well, stay tuned. Not only by the end of this episode are you going to be a practical optimist, but I think you're going to be more optimistic and hopeful about your dating lives as well, with the incredible, oh my God, dream collaboration here at Flirt Headquarters with Dr. Sue Varma. So much good stuff coming for you. And also, thank you so much for being here. This new intro to the intro I'm doing is not just about teasing the episode. It's not just about politely requesting that you rate, review, subscribe to the show, and share this episode or another favorite episode with someone you know, even like a little bit. It's also just to say thank you for being here, because I couldn't do this without you. I really could not. And I just so appreciate you taking the time wherever you are in the world, wherever you're tuning in from, whatever you're doing, driving, working out, walking, in the kitchen, at home, at work, at school, all of the above, none of the above, something else completely. Just thank you so much for being here. All right, let's get into the official intro now, and then the full interview with Dr. Sue Varma coming. Coming up on this episode of Flirtations, we're talking practical optimism and how this grounded, science-backed approach can help guide us toward more fulfilling connections and loving relationships. Joining us for this conversation is Dr. Sue Varma, a board-certified psychiatrist, clinical assistant professor at NYU, and author of the book Practical Optimism, The Art, Science, and Practice of Exceptional Well-Being. Her work has helped countless people navigate trauma, stress, and uncertainty, and today she's helping us bring more purpose and emotional resilience into our dating lives. In this conversation, we unpack what it really means to be optimistic in a world that doesn't always make it so easy. We talk about why it's so hard to be alone, but how we can do just that without giving into loneliness. We explore how we can stop comparing ourselves to others, how we can find purpose in small, everyday moments, and why empathy is so important to true, genuine connection. We also ask questions like, is happiness a choice? Can we train our brains to think bigger and love deeper? And what does it mean to be a practical optimist? If you're struggling to keep the hope alive out there dating or are having a hard time believing in yourself, you don't want to miss this episode. Dr. Varma's work has sincerely changed my own life and my long-time battle with depression, and I hope that by the end of this episode, if you're having a hard time in your life, that things will get just a bit easier. All right, flirties, let's do this and meet Dr. Sue Varma.
I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. Hello, my name is Benjamin. I'm the flirt coach and a gay Libra. Everyone has an inner flirt.
Hey, flirty.
Live, laugh, flirt.
Work the flirt.
Work the flirt. Delulu is the Salulu. Expert on the flirt.
Hey, flirty. There's always another flirt.
Everyone has an inner flirt. Get out of your head and into the flirt.
Flirties, on the show today, we welcome the brilliant Dr. Sue Varma. Dr. Varma is a board-certified psychiatrist, clinical assistant professor at NYU, a former medical director of the World Trade Center Mental Health Program after 9/11, and author of the insightful book Practical Optimism, The Art, Science, and Practice of Exceptional Well-Being, here today to have a conversation with us about how optimism intersects with dating, relationships, and self-worth. Hi, Dr. Varma, and welcome to Flirtation.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. This is a real pinch me moment here at Flirt Headquarters. I've been just a fan, a follower, admirer for about a year and a half now, as I discovered you on the Bright Side podcast.
Oh my God,
that was
thank
my
you.
Introduction to you and your work, and just thank you for doing what you do.
Oh my God, I love it. Thank you. And thank you for informing, entertaining, all of it. Educating.
I do what I can. I feel like the mustache does a lot of the heavy lifting for me. It helps.
Does it have a name? Does it have its own personality?
Oh my gosh, yes. Full name, first and last.
Really?
Yes, Leopold Bismarck.
Oh, I love that.
Yes.
Very cool.
Leopold Bismarck. I don't know. It just came to me. It felt very strong.
Yes. And regal.
And regal.
Yes.
Thank you for that,
Yeah.
Dr. Varma. All right. As we get into the conversation today, a lot of questions came through from the flirties, of course, about dating and relationships as it relates to self-worth, self-love, how to stay hopeful out there. There's a lot of overwhelm, burnout, frustration, just how we can develop a more optimistic, positive mindset when we're out there dating, connecting, forming relationships, friendships, all of the above. But as we get to know you a little bit here at the top of the show, I thought it would be fun to ask you this question about purpose. In your book, Practical Optimism, you lay out 8 pillars of practical optimism, and one of those is purpose.
Yes.
And so I want to hear a little bit more about how you've kind of discovered your own purpose, maybe your why, and just what that means to you.
Yes, no, thank you. And, so I think of the word, like purpose sounds really big and it's got to be like grand or glamorous. I think there's a lot of misconception around that, or that other people have to understand it. And I think purpose can really just be very small in terms of like, what is my purpose today here in this conversation, for example, right? Like, what is it that I want to share? What is it that you want to share? What do we want the flirties to get out of it, right? So to me, it's about being intentional in any activity that you choose, And so for me, like, I feel so driven by the work that I do that I don't even think of it as work. Like, yes, there is a hustle and there's a grind and there's like a rigor to it, but I love it so much. And like, for me, this combination of like being intellectually curious about what makes people tick, right? Like, why do people do what they do? I've always been interested in human behavior. And then also I'm like a nerd for the sciences. Like, I want to know, like, what's the evidence? So if I'm going to suggest something to someone, I'll say the science shows, the evidence shows, like if I'm talking to my patients and they're like, why do you want me to do this? Or like, I'm feeling depressed or I'm feeling anxious and you're asking me to exercise. Why would I do that? I can't even get out of bed, right? So I'll say the evidence shows something as little as 10 minutes a day, or like a quick walk around your block, or 5,000 steps a day. Forget the 10,000. When it comes to mental health, a new study in the last few months, and this is true, showed that all we need is 5,000 steps a day, 5 to 7,000. That's the sweet spot for preventing depression, for preventing anxiety, for treating it, right? So I love science. I love like when you can show me the facts and how does this change the brain. And then I love helping people, right? So like all of this intellectual, curiosity is great, but what are you doing in service of others? So like every single day I feel called. I read something and I might share it, on Instagram, on social media. I might share it on the Today Show or CBS, wherever, so that I want people to, in 5 minutes, because that's all you get in live TV. So I love that we have longer, right? Like not even, sometimes it's like when 5 minutes is a good day, normally it might be 3.5 minute segment. And I'm like, how am I supposed to distill 20 years of clinical science and research in 3.5 minutes? And I'm sharing that with the anchor. So I might get like 3 30-second sound bites. So I've gotten good with practice of sharing tidbits on what you can do today, right now. So, that's what I'm hoping. That's what lights me up. And, Ben, I really do think it's important in this day and age. I think we've become too self-involved, too self-absorbed in terms of like, whether it's competing with other people, whether it's living up to societal expectations, that we've forgotten what makes us excited, So like, I think that everyone should have something, whether it's paid or unpaid, as part of their purpose in life that gets them motivated out of bed. It could literally be like taking care of a pet, taking care of a plant, right? Like take care of someone other than yourself, like take care of you, but also think about you. Every single person listening has something unique talent about them. They're the best at whatever they do, whether it's like decorating a home, whether it's pottery, gardening, or maybe you haven't figured it out, Latin dancing, figure it out, right? And then do it just for yourself. And that is something that comes, I talk about mastery in this book, and flow, and like getting into your flow state, like 10 minutes a day, spending something, even if it's like on Duolingo, to be like, I want to brush up on something. But it's this idea of a flow state is when you're like good at something, but you're willing to commit to it regularly and getting better at it. And what I love about flow state is that when you're in the moment, your brain cannot be compatible with ruminating, right? So when you're focused on that activity, you have dopamine, you have norepinephrine, and really causes you to like focus on that activity. So to me, purpose can be big in life, like, what am I working towards? But it could also be, what am I doing today that is bringing me joy and joy to other people?
So good already. This was one of the mindset shifts that you helped me make where like, to tie it to dating and relationships, I'll hear sometimes, well, you go on a first date and you just want to know, right, who is this person? You want to know everything about them. Like, are we going to be in a relationship? Are we going to get married? Are they the one? And when it comes to purpose, you're like, why am I here? What's the point? What am I doing with my life kind of thing? And so you might... like you can go from 0 to 100 so fast, but what about step 1? What about step 2? What about what you can do today?
Yes.
What about getting out of your head and just noticing, oh, wow, there's a bird around me. Oh, wow, look how pretty that plant is.
Yes.
Or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, I love that you brought up like that a million things come to our mind when like, I understand like when you're dating, like there's so much you're carrying, in every interaction with a new person, you're carrying like a suitcase with you. Like we carry our baggage, right? And like we bring our baggage in a relationship, but we also bring our baggage sometime to the first meeting because it's like, yes, I'm only meeting you for the first time, but I've had X amount of years of expectations and letdown and disappointment, right? Yeah. And so we all have a history. And, what Practical Optimism would say to people in dating is, approach each opportunity with fresh eyes and do what you need to do so that you can come to the table with fresh eyes. And that means like being well rested, before the date, trying to shut off distraction so that you're not like responding to work emails right up until, the dinner, the coffee, whatever the meetup is, so that you're not dealing with all of the negativity and the baggage that is life, right? So like that mindset of how do you approach a new person, a new opportunity, and it could be a job opportunity that you literally fill in the blank. It doesn't have to be a date. Right. It could be a job interview, right? Like imagine this is your like, either you're not getting call back or you're getting interviews and you're getting strung along and you're like, you've had it. So just think of anything in life, because, this could be a much broader conversation, is how do we maintain excitement and enthusiasm and energy and vigor and openness when we've been hurt and disappointed in life in general, right? So this approach of, starting with having a purpose and intention and clarity, right? That's the first pillar. And there's 8 of them. The last one is about, it's called practicing healthy habits, but it really could just be, it's about the execution. So anything you want, if you want to end up being happy in a relationship, right? Yeah. So that's the execution of it. And then all of the things in between that come along the way. The next P is about processing your emotions. And that's a big one, right? Like when you're dating and you're hurt and you're feeling rejected and all of the negativity, the negative thoughts that can creep up in your mind, like I'm not attractive enough, I'm not worthy enough, I'm too much, that idea of not enough versus too much. So being able to manage your emotions. And the next one is problem solving. So really anything you want in life, this Practical Optimism puts you in an approach of the optimism is keeping an open mind that good is possible. Really, that's what it comes down to. That is the definition of optimism, is believing that good things are possible, right? So let's just start there. If someone is struggling and they're like, I don't know, or I used to believe good things are possible, but clearly not because it hasn't worked out for me, right? So being aware of how your pessimism is not only creeping in, but how it's debilitating you. Because there's a difference, right? Like we all have I think pessimism in small doses has been shown to be healthy because it makes you do your research. Like it might make you want to figure out, is this the right person for me? I want to do a little background. I'm skeptical in a healthy way, the trust but verify type approach. Yes. But too much of it makes us paralyzed because you're like, nope, I'm not dating anymore. There's no one out there, right? Like, so you have to you want to marry a little bit of healthy skepticism, pessimism. I say that the optimists build the planes, but the pessimists build the parachutes. Right. And we need both, right? Like we want the planes, but we want the safety measure. So do your due diligence on the person. And by all means, if something doesn't feel right, investigate it, right? But that doesn't mean to stay home and never leave your home again because you've been heartbroken.
Right. Okay, we're going to stay here. You know what? I'm going to scramble all of my questions all over the place because some things are coming up here at the start of the interview that I know the flirties, like I try and put myself in their minds. Like, what are they thinking right now? And one thing I think they might be thinking, just to reframe or recap Practical Optimism a little bit, it's get the book. And also it's about daily habits. It's about daily practices. It's about having an open mind. It's about being curious. It's about practicing a lot of patience and self-compassion, because one of the questions that we're going to get to in a moment, right, is happiness as a choice, or is happiness a choice? I think too often we just want to feel the emotion. Right? We just want to feel the relief. And so we'll do sometimes whatever we have to do to get there to feel that, which might be going all in on a connection, on a relationship that isn't good for us, but they're texting us back, right? Maybe we're hooking up and that's good. Maybe they're liking our story, our post. We know they're a terrible match for us, but they're giving us something that feels good. And in that regard, too often we outsource our self-worth, our just feelings of self-esteem and self-confidence to somebody else, right? And then we get in this loop, this trap that can be very tricky to get out of. But I want to come back to this thing you mentioned a moment ago about biases, right? So for the flirty that's listening, that is, you know what, it's never worked out for me, it's not going to happen, or they're having these thoughts of, God, how did they get the date, right? How are they in a relationship? How did it work for them? But it's not working for me. How can we start to flirt with those thoughts a little bit?
Yes. So, one thing I would say is, like, be very careful when you're comparing yourself to someone, right? Because, like, I'm all about having good, positive, healthy role models, right? But in my mind, the question wouldn't be how is it that they're getting it and how am I not getting it? I would say if this person is a true, good, healthy role model. So think of, like, maybe it's your parents, maybe it's an aunt or uncle, maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it's an older sister, maybe it's someone you know who's been married for a long time or in a happy, committed relationship. The question in my mind could be rephrased to say, I'm so happy that this person has this. This person is the example of what I want. How can I also get this? So it's a subtle shift in the way that you phrase the question. Rather than say, how come I can't have this? You've already made an assumption that you can't have it. Why are you assuming you can't have it? Why not say, they have this and I too want this? That rephrases the question and frames it in a positive way to say, this too is possible for me. And it's all that I have to do now is figure out how to get it. I know what I want, because that's the first step, right? Because a lot of us will lie and cheat ourselves and say, this breadcrumbing situation that I'm in, this person who's orbiting me by looking at my stories and never really responding or never asking me on a date.
Yeah.
We tell ourselves that this is what we want. Oh yeah, of course, a person who's already giving us the little bit of attention that we see, the low-hanging fruit that we see as possible. Scratch that. Think bigger. Right? Like, think bigger, think like ideal. What is the best case scenario? What is your dream person? I have a patient that I was working with, and she's in a relationship that doesn't really serve her, but it's available to her. It's someone who really has a lot of work still, that they need to do, but they're not willing to do. They're not ready to do things that they need to work on. They have identified areas of problem in their life, stresses, substance abuse, a lot, but they're just like, I know what I need to do, and I'll do it someday. Versus this person has been in therapy for a long time. They have worked on themselves, and they're so ahead of the game. And I said, okay, look, this is fine. You can be happy in this situation, but it sounds like you're not, right? So what would be an ideal, right? And then when we started listing characteristics, who this person is, how old they would be, how much money they would make, where they would be living, she was like, oh my God, I just never even thought that was even possible, right? So the first step is just envisioning what it is that you want and think big if there was no limitation. A lot of people say, well, that can never happen. That person doesn't exist. Scratch that for a minute, right? And there's an optimism intervention, and it's called best possible scenario, where you envision that the thing that you want, the person, the relationship that you want, it has already worked out. And then you work backwards and you embrace the positive feelings that come with having arrived, at what you want. So I think a lot of people get trapped because they don't allow themselves to think really big, really grand. And so they accept a lot less because they think this is all that's possible, or they hold on to these negative, unfulfilling relationships because they're like, I don't want to be alone, right? If I this person is giving me enough, and the alternative seems so stark and gray. And I think people can't handle two things, and they can't handle boredom and they can't handle uncertainty. And they did an experiment where they had them, people in an experiment sit for 15 minutes, and they left them with like an electrical shock stimulation. And people would rather shock themselves than sit there alone and bored. So what does that say?
That we want to feel something.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Like,
or we want that distraction, right? We don't want to be with ourselves.
Right. And I've had patients who are like, I can't even be alone in the shower. I'll put music on, like I'll have Netflix streaming. I'll have to think of our parents' generation would fall asleep to the TV, right? Like,
yes.
So this idea that we would do anything but be by ourselves, that is what scares me the most. And I talk about this concept of having an aloneness practice, right?
Okay.
And it's this intentional idea of I'm choosing not loneliness. I'm not saying embrace loneliness because we have a whole crisis of that happening, but I'm saying choosing to really enjoy your own company, getting to know who you are, like as if you were somebody else, enjoying your company. And, when we are feeling good in someone else's company, it's not that person that's bringing the positivity, the joy, the recreation to the table. It's us. It's our own ability to experience joy that is being brought out in this other person's company, right?
Yeah.
But it is our own ability to experience joy that we're tapping into, which already exists, that doesn't require another person. So date yourself, I love having lunch by myself. I love it doesn't have to be a vacation. Like if that seems like a lot of people are going on vacation by themselves and love it. But I would say solo trips are like a big industry now, but like a museum, a movie, like the idea of being caught on a Friday night, eat at the bar, talk to the bartender, talk to the server, talk to people, when you're going to the bathroom, talk to the people there, right? So it's a different mindset shift of you're not operating from a deficit. It's not that you're alone.
Right.
You're open. And I think it's a different way of looking at things.
You're offering the Flirty so many good pieces of dating advice. And one I want to come back to is this one you mentioned about like almost reverse engineering your life in the sense that if you knew a year from today, a year from this exact moment listening to this episode, you were going to meet your dream person or you were already going to be in your dream relationship, how would you show up today? Right?
Yes.
How would you start acting not just out in the world differently, but within, like, how would you treat yourself differently?
Yes.
Would you have an aloneness practice, right? Would you take the solo trip? Would you do the Friday night out to catch a movie or take yourself out for brunch? Like, I think so many of us are in this waiting for when mentality.
Yes.
Of when I have the relationship, the person, the finances, the job, the whatever. And yes, there's going to be some restrictions with regard to maybe finances, but why wait? You can do a lot now.
Totally. I love that. And, what you're saying is really giving people, I think, hope, right? It's like this belief that what I want is absolutely achievable. It exists. It's possible. I'm going to create it. How is it possible? Because I'm going to create it, right? And I think the biggest thing we do is accept defeat before even getting out of the gate, and therefore we don't put ourselves in situations, and I'm a big believer in meeting people in the wild, organically. And I love that there's so many new opportunities that are popping up no matter what your interest in is, if you're cycling or running or yoga or book lovers meeting. There's so many great outdoor book clubs, silent book clubs, there's daytime discos, 6 to 8 p.m., early bird, dancing, whatever it is. And I think that when I see people who are happy and lit up in their own company, I'm you're going to live till 100 because they're not waiting for anyone to do anything. And they might be in relationships and they may feel this person isn't giving me what I want, or maybe they've decided that they're destined to be stuck with this person, which is not great, right? But they've been, together for 30 years and they're whatever. But they go out and they have their own friends and they have their own interests, So
very important.
How do you light yourself up from within? And I love what you're saying. And maybe it is practicing that mentality of, I know for a fact that it's going to work out. And I'm going to then operate backwards from that point. And I love that, reverse engineering, just like you said, and doing all those fun things right now. But what you're doing is you're putting yourself in this very positive, we are attracted to positive people. Optimists and practical optimists hold on to friendships like no one else. They have friends from childhood. They're always meeting new people. They are the life of the party. They emanate so much goodness. They're smiling and warm and kind to other people. And that signals I'm a safe space. Talk to me.
Yeah.
Tell me your problems. And people just gravitate towards them, compared to someone who's angry or hostile or like bitter, or like you meet someone at a party and they're like just getting drunk and they're like, screw people. People are all assholes. I'm like, who's going to want to date someone like that? Right.
Right. Dare I say an optimist practice is to flirt? Yes.
Yes.
Go out and make connections.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll just offer a quick flirting tip. I think one of the traits that makes people gravitate towards me is not the mustache. That might repel them. That might turn them away. But it's this trait of agreeableness. I wouldn't really describe it as likability or charisma or that I'm super funny or anything like that. I can be, but it's really like I tend to be pretty easy to get along with. I ask questions. I'm curious. I show interest as if I want to get to know you because I truly do, whether it's in the moment, whether it's a longstanding connection, friendship, relationship. Like I just try and be overall pretty agreeable.
Yes.
Not that I'm going to, always agree with someone if there's a difference of opinion or belief or value or something like that. Of course, like I'm not going to be friends with everybody, but that's one of the things that is really just, I feel like beneficial and helps me be optimistic, is having just less judgment, less criticism, and just more curiosity.
100%, and I'm so glad you said that because I actually read a paper the other day that was talking about, the big 5 traits like agreeableness, conscientious, extroversion, openness, and then neuroticism. And they said that people who are open, who are agreeable, who are extroverted, and conscientious all were more optimistic. So like all of these traits were associated with optimism, but also, like you said, like likable, and it's sort of like this self-fulfilling prophecy that if you expect others to be nice and likable, they will be, right? Because you as a result are putting your best foot forward because you're expecting, and they did a study where like in a classroom, a student was told like everyone is going to be nice to you. And so they went into this with this expectation. They ended up making more friends because they're like, oh, they're going to be nice to me. They are nice people. Oh, I'm going to be nice too, versus being told they're hostile, they hate you. Nothing had changed in the 2 classrooms. Right. Everybody was exactly the same. But when you go in with that idea, so you are putting forth the energy, whether or not you realize it, that you want to receive, on the other end. And and I felt that, we've never met in this face to face before, and like I think there's this expression of like charm and disarm when you make someone feel at ease and you make them feel safe and seen, so I feel like I can sense that in people really quickly, and I sense that in you, and I think it's such an amazing trait to have, that you make people feel comfortable and at ease immediately.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. Yeah, that's what I hope for. It makes, I think, for just better conversations, not just on Flirtations, but in like out in the world as well, just with friends, like whoever. Totally. When people feel like there's just an element of trust there already, I think that really helps.
And I think, when you were talking about like when a person approaches a date, and is this going to work out? Is this person going to be my life partner? I think that stepping back and just saying, I'm going to have fun, right? And that's all. And whether or not this leads to anything, I will have made potentially maybe a new friend, right? And if anything, and a new connection. And, I always look at every interaction that we all have something to learn from one another. And it doesn't matter who the person is. Somebody, like I know a lot of people, some people I know make fun of me, like if I'm in a car and if I, like, let's say if I'm in an Uber or a Lyft, if I have time, I will talk to the person driving me. And I remember like someone making fun of me. They're like, who does that? Like I specifically choose the silent options and no one talks to me,
Yeah.
And this world in which we walk around with headphones on, it basically says, do not disturb, don't talk to me. And then people wonder why am I not meeting anyone? Why do I feel so lonely? And I'm like, something as simple as removing earbuds says, I'm open to conversation. If you're standing at the elevator, let's say you move to a new city and you're standing at the elevator, do you have a do not disturb sign on? And a lot of us do that to protect ourselves because we don't want to be rejected. And so we basically say, I'm not available. And then you shut your world, you shut your opportunity for learning. You never know, the person at the elevator might be like, oh, well, my son is coming to visit from out of town, and he's your age, and I'd be happy to introduce him to you. That type of thing.
Yes, exactly. I've talked about like the headphone, right? Like the head down sort of culture we have, always looking at our phone sort of thing. This do not disturb sign. I've never heard it phrased in that way before, but it's so true. And I think, yes, let's ask this question now. I think it ties in nicely where you also open your book talking about unprecedented times call for unprecedented coping skills. And so tying this also to a discussion about mental health, I think, of course, practical optimism really ties into mental health. And a part of what I'm bringing in a couple things here, a few things, which I tend to do, but I also want to talk about here this feeling of, I feel like just emotional overwhelm, of numbness, of almost shutdown, of burnout. I feel like this is an elephant in the room that we're not really acknowledging or talking about. Where, it's we want connection, but we're at home by ourselves scrolling on our phone while we're listening to Netflix, while we're FaceTiming, while we're cooking dinner. And then, now the smoke alarm's going off. We don't want to be bored, right? We don't want to be with ourselves. We're looking for those distractions.
Yes.
And yet at the same time, we're just sort of emotionally numb.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's understandable on one level why we're numb, because numbness in some ways can be a defense mechanism to being overwhelmed and to being, traumatized on some level. Like, and there's trauma, the big T, of like life-threatening things. And then there's little t, like all the daily grievances. And just turning on the news, it feels like an assault. It's like, oh my God, how many more people died today? And in what part of the world? And how is this okay? And it's hard for us to see like mass violence on this level and nobody doing anything about it, because when we were kids, we were told like, the people in charge will take care of everything. And you're like, no, they're the ones creating the problems. How is this possible? Right. So I think it's really hard to be exposed on a daily level to the number. We were never meant to be this in touch with reality. Like, right, like people were living in their little worlds and their little communities, and news may trickle and infiltrate at some point, but not at the high speed. You open your phone and you know what's going on in every nook and cranny. Everyone has a phone now. It doesn't matter what remote, small part of the world you're in. You are now connected and it's televised. All of the egregious things that are happening. So we're exposed to more things in real time, and we feel as a result more helpless than we ever have. And how do you deal with this? So I'm just thinking that a lot of the things, a feeling of desensitization, lack of empathy, right? Like it's compassion fatigue on some level.
Yeah.
You feel so much, but you can do so little. And so, I would say really look at your monitoring your screen time and asking yourself, what are the news sources? Very quickly, your Instagram algorithm will feed you what you're doing. Like I'm I'm in the middle of like a kitchen renovation at the very beginning of it. Like actually, the next thing I know, I'm getting a 500 remodeling
cabinets,
design,
counters, backsplashes,
exactly. Totally. And I'm like, what happened? So it's like, it's funny within 10 minutes, like first it was perimenopause and losing belly fat. Like literally it's funny, like within it figures out
your
what
whole
you want.
world is different.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, how did I, like my feed is so different. So think about your feed. What are you feeding your mind? Because this is you're ingesting content the same way. Like if we're so careful about microplastics and the bottles and what are we drinking? What are we eating? This is another form of consumption and ingestion, and our brain can't separate sometimes what's on TV or what's on our screen from reality. So when we're viewing it, it's as if it's happening near us, even if we know intellectually, like this is thousands of miles away, but it feels like it's close to home. Yeah. So think about that why are you, if you are numbing out and you are using dating as a distraction or like putting up with nonsense, are you trying to escape in some ways, right? So get to the root of it and say, am I using these dating situations that with people that I don't like or that don't like me, but I'm just hanging on because I'm trying to avoid reality? And so then say to yourself, let me look at my inputs and what can I do to create more oasis moments? So this idea of finding 1 or 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, screen free, and, creating a little Zen den in your home, throwing a pillow on the floor, deep breathing, shutting out the world, but in a healthy way, without replacing one distraction for another. So, and really I would say step back and assess, get a bigger 360 view of your dating life and social life in general, because a lot of times people will say, I'm with this person that I don't really like, but I don't have a choice because I have no one else to hang out with, are you using this simply for companionship, and are there other people who could also fit, who would bring you greater joy, without making you feel bad about yourself? Because I think it ultimately, when we're with someone that we're not excited about, we feel badly about ourselves. Like, really? Like, what am I doing? Like, this is not aligning with my values. We don't feel like we're being authentic.
Right. Yeah, that's so good. These oasis moments. That's a very, interesting concept. Just giving yourself those many micro moments, going back to practical optimism, those daily practices in the moment that you can go to. Because I got a lot of questions here from the flirties, tying it to dating, of course, about burnout and overwhelm and just dating fatigue. A few flirties mentioned feeling defeated, right? Hopeless, giving up. And I imagine all of this ties into these feelings of, right, is it ever, if you're single and listening, is it ever going to happen for me? Right? What's wrong with me kind of thing? Why isn't this working?
Yes.
Yeah.
And, I would also say is like, it's okay to be honest. It doesn't have to be the first date, right? But if you see something going or you see things progressing, I think a lot of times people are hurt because they're afraid to ask the big questions, and then they're like, Absolutely. They wait until like the 10th date and they're like, oh, you never wanted to be in a relationship? Like, I had no idea, and because they were so afraid of turning the other person off. Right. So I feel like getting good, valuable information that might change your level of emotional investment. And then I'm not saying you don't need to, you don't continue. You may decide like, okay, that's fine. Right. Neither am I at this time, right? But just so that you and the other person are on the same page, having those kind of conversations, and it may start with something like, how are the apps going for you? How has dating been going for you? That, and asking open-ended questions allows another person to share, and then they may on their own be like, yeah, it's fine. I'm not looking for anything right now, so it's perfect for me, And then you get your answer in a way without having to put yourself out there or feel vulnerable. But I guess the point I want to make is that it's okay to be vulnerable and it's okay to get rejected, because rejection is information. It's information of, are we compatible? Do you like me? What are you looking for? Is this truly a match? And I think going back to childhood, I think a lot of people are also disappointed because they saw their parents' relationship not work out, and their parents needed to be in therapy and would never go, and never went. And so they're like, I don't want to repeat the nonsense or, so, it does go back to, our childhood in some cases, why we can't show up for other people.
So many good pieces of wisdom. Yeah, ask the questions sooner rather than later, of course. I mean, this is how, and it's weird, like there's always trends I pay attention to on social media. And now lately, there's this real pushback against the word situationships and having, wanting those to be reframed as actual relationships in the same sense and with the same kind of gravitas and importance as the relationship that has the commitment where you're boyfriend, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, right? You're in that partnership. And ultimately, I think we're driven by our need for connection, to be seen, wanted, understood, valued, needed, right? I get that. But I still say ask those important questions sooner rather than later. Yes. Because you might really hurt yourself. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Yes. And I see that. And I think it's just, it is what it is. I think on one level, like we want to be sensitive and respectful of however that person defines connection for them.
Sure.
But I think that's important conversation to have is, how do you define connection? And what does that look like? And even something, I had a patient who felt so much better when she asked, what is the frequency of connection that you would like? Is it texting once a day? Is it 3 times a week? Is it once a week? So that you're on the same page. And if your question alienates the other person, then that is also information that I'm trying to be respectful, and that you're perceiving that as me being, too much.
Absolutely. I mean, at the very least, as much as dating coaches say, and I say, right, don't have expectations as a yoga teacher, don't have expectations, but also they are realistic. that
Yeah.
you will have expectations, but it's about voicing those expectations. I love that around could be texting frequency, right? Connection frequency. If you can at least come into some alignment around expectations of what you're both looking for, it doesn't mean one person is, or anyone is always forthcoming with the truth, but you can at least come into alignment around expectations. And then now we start to at least read the same book, come close to reading the same chapter, perhaps. It'll help alleviate a lot of anxiety and perhaps hurt in the long run.
Totally.
Yeah. All right, Dr. Varma, I've got a few more questions I got to get to. One, you just alluded to the flirties. This was probably the most popular question that came through, this feeling of enoughness. Right? And so how does that tie into practical optimism? This concept of being enough, not enough, too much?
Yes.
Help us.
Yes. So, one of the pillars in this is called pride, and it's really about self-compassion. And I think, when we were growing up, we were told that like self-esteem really matters. And the problem that I have with self-esteem is that it really relies on what's going on in your life. And if things are going positive, then your self-esteem is doing well, right? Like you won an award, you got the job promotion, you had some big thing, self-esteem will be up. And if it doesn't, self-esteem crashes. And I don't like that. I don't ever want how I feel about myself to be tied to something extrinsic. And so, in terms of like self-compassion says that you are enough and you are worthy simply because you exist. That's it. I don't have to have any reason. Nothing good has to happen. And if you think about it, when friends catch up, they're like, what's new, right? Like, am I performing for you? Why do I have to have something that's new, right? Like I wrote one book. The question is like, when is the next one coming out? And I'm like, girl, can we just like take a moment?
Oh my God. Yeah, for real.
And I'm like, do you know how many years goes into writing this? Or like, when somebody has one baby and like within 3 months, like, when's the next one? And you're like, dude, I'm still like nursing, doing overnights with this one.
Yes.
Like, what are you talking about? So we're in this society that like ties, you're only as good as your last project. You're only as good as your next project. And it's like, screw the projects. No more projects. Let me just be. And that's what self-compassion says. And it says, and this is from the work of Kristen Neff, and I love her work on self-compassion. And, there's three things. There's like acceptance, mindfulness of, what the problem is. Like, let's say you screw up at work, right? Like, you're observing, you're aware of the negative thoughts. You've accepted that this situation happens. And then there's a piece about it of common humanity, like we're human. I'm not the first person that this ever happened to. And then I've added a fourth one, which is like action. Like if you start becoming enveloped by shame, which is what happens to a lot of people, like then that says I am bad, as opposed to guilt, which is I did something bad, right? Like guilt focuses on a very specific behavior. Did something bad happen? Were you responsible for it? Take responsibility and change it. And then that's done with. Versus shame internalizes that feeling of I'm not enough, I'm not worthy. So ask yourself, what happened, right? Did you mess up somewhere? And is it actionable? And can you change it?
Okay. I got a follow-up question here. I wanted to talk about empathy. I feel like there's a huge deficit of empathy, specifically in dating. I think there is an empathy gap, to be quite honest, between men and women, where women tend to have more empathy than men. If you're listening, fellas, you're the ones here. We're not talking about you. We're not talking about you, but I think there is an empathy gap. And what can happen is we build those walls, right? We close ourselves off. We have a hard time trusting others. We have a hard time putting ourselves in other people's shoes, from seeing things from other people's perspectives, from trying to understand where someone may be coming from. We may be quick to just move on, right? Ghost. Well, they ghosted me. I'm going to ghost the next person. I'm going to ghost them back or whatever. And so I just want to hear a little bit more about self-compassion, but specifically empathy, and now that plays into practical optimism.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Thank you for asking that. One question that I often struggle with is, can you teach someone empathy? And I think that's so hard. What would you, I'm curious what you think.
I think it's a learned skill, right? I think some people may be more naturally inclined to empathy than others. I think about like, I've always had this natural inclination to care for other living things. Like I think about like, the kids like on the playground that would like try and like chase bugs or something or play with bugs, maybe out of curiosity. But me, I was like, don't hurt it. Please don't hurt it. Right. Yeah. Be kind. It's alive. Yeah. So I've always had this inclination towards empathy. I also read a lot as a kid. I did a lot of experiential learning and playing with toys and things. So I feel like it was always there, but also it was learned and it was nurtured within me by my parents and my teachers. So
yeah, it's interesting. Like when you mentioned reading fiction, like literary fiction is supposed to be so helpful because there's this concept of theory of the mind is what is, and this is something that like we should do with our kids earlier on is like, how do you think? So, you're reading a book and Johnny's getting bullied. How is Johnny feeling getting bullied right now? What does that feel like? Right. And can you relate to that? And I think, there are going to be some people who are going to, as adults, really have difficulty displaying empathy because they just, the world centers around them. You see this a lot in narcissists, right? Like they lack it, they lack remorse. And you'll know it very early on, like someone who doesn't take responsibility. Let's say that they stood you up or made you wait 30 minutes or, had planned a date and either didn't show up or canceled at the last minute. And it's, in my mind, it's not necessarily that first bad thing that happens. It's how does that person explain it, do they try to explain it away? Do they rationalize it? So it's like, the situation, like let's say somebody had to cancel at the last minute, that's one thing. But do they seem to acknowledge what they put you through or what were the ramifications for you? So how that person deals with it, I think is very telling. And some people, you may not be able to teach empathy. And then what do you do? Right. So that's really, really tricky. But I do think that it can grow. I think when two people care about one another, and if you were to explain, because I do a lot of couples therapy in my practice, and I'll see that even though it seems as if, let's say, the male partner can't get what she's feeling, I can see that when she's crying or when she seems very upset, I can visually see he is very distraught by that. And that to me is a good sign because it's like, it says, I'm so sorry. I had no idea you were struggling or you're suffering. What do I need to do to make this better? And there are people, if they're lacking that, then it's sort of like, that's also information. Like it's very hard to be with someone long-term who lacks empathy because it's not just for you, it's for other people. And they don't have the remorse. They don't have that guilt. Like if we're talking on, I have this sort of joke in my head which is the people who are neurotic, they drive themselves crazy. They're like, oh my God, like with the guilt and the shame and right versus sociopaths, they drive everyone else crazy because nothing is ever their fault. They're always externalizing. They don't take responsibility. They blame other people for anything that bad that's happened. And that's very hard in a relationship. If the person that you're with will never take responsibility, will never it's gaslighting, right? They're blaming you. It's all your fault. That's hard. Like, and sometimes it comes along with certain mental health challenges. Like I see this a lot, like in ADD, for example, like many of the patients, like they're so used to being blamed because as kids, they would always forget their homework, their notebook, their backpack, like their parent bought them, like an Apple Watch. The next day it's missing. They left it on the school bus or whatever it is. So they're used to their whole life feeling less than. So their tendency may be to be defensive, So you see certain disorders where somebody's like, I'm tired of being blamed and made to feel less than. And so blaming another person or making excuses or defensiveness is part of it. And it's understandable. Then you have to sort of coach the other people in the family to be like, and then you have to coach that person to be like, listen, all of this nonsense back and forth argument would stop if you could just say, I'm sorry, sometimes it's that simple. So you can teach, you can train, but I would say starting very early is really important.
Yeah, I love that mental health is coming back into the conversation. And I think some of the flirties might be thinking, well, I'm not here, right? I want a partner, not a project, right? This isn't Build-A-Bear. I'm not here to fix anybody. Yes. And that's not what we're saying, but it's to practice empathy means like you're not always going to understand one another completely and fully. Like you're not always going to see eye to eye. And so you at least start to develop some understanding about one another, where each person is coming from, like the maybe the origin story of those thoughts, feelings kind of thing. Yeah. Totally. And so that's ultimately, as we were talking about shame throughout this conversation, how we can, if you're feeling ashamed or the other person's feeling ashamed, how we can start to lift the veil, the blanket on some of those not so great feelings, right? And just create connection, because
Yes.
that's what we want.
Yes. And to say to yourself, you may not have been in that specific situation. Like if somebody was like, this happened to me at work today and I'm sharing it with you because you're my partner and you're not giving me any feedback. And if that person were to be like, well, I don't know, because I can't really relate to that. I've never been in that situation. It's like, forget the situation. The feeling that I'm alluding to is, let's say I was embarrassed at work today. Have you ever been embarrassed in your life, right? Like, because I think a lot of people who lack empathy, they'll say they're lazy, right? They're just like, I don't know what that feels like, or they don't want to have to tap into their own strongly charged negative emotions, because empathy requires you to tap into something and to feel, right? And so if you're running away from feeling anything, you're like, no, I don't do empathy because I don't want to feel, right? So ask yourself, is there something missing intellectually? Because maybe you haven't been in my situation, right? But you've been in a similar one. So put yourself in a position of anything that reminds you vaguely, come on, right? So it requires you to not be emotionally lazy.
Yeah. So good. I'm going to squeeze in just one final question. Dr. Varma, I alluded to it in the beginning, but I'm going to come full circle to this line we've all heard, right? Is happiness a choice? This question we've all heard. We're going to end there. What do you think?
So I think happiness is a habit, and happiness is a practice.
Yes.
And so a choice in the sense, the choice is only the first step, right? Like you choosing, like if I say I'm choosing to be a healthier person, that's amazing, right? But am I backing that choice up with action? And that's what practical optimism is that it's the practice of optimism. It's the practice of hope that requires work. And some days it's a 5-minute practice, some days it's longer, but it's like learning how to ride a bike or learning a new skill, a language, a sport, where you practice. And, even though I wrote the book on it, I still have to practice it every single day. I went to my own therapy. I highly recommend it. Cognitive behavioral therapy, and it really helped me change the way that I think. And I look at it as, when it's raining, I don't go out in the rain because I've somehow perfected, I don't walk around with like an umbrella and a raincoat. No, I take out my raincoat, I take out my jacket. I say the weather's not good. How do I better prepare for it? So it's in the same way I would say happiness is achievable. Think about all the things that might be interfering with it, right? If you do have an anxiety, if you disorder, depression, if you have mental health challenges, do something about it, right? Get therapy, get help. And it may not even be as daunting as you're perceiving it to be, right? Like if you have health insurance, turn the back of the card. If you're lucky enough, if you have a job that has an employee assistance program, maybe there's a walk-in clinic at the local university that does sliding scale. Like there's a million different ways. BetterHelp, Talkspace, all of these virtual platforms. I'm not recommending anyone in particular, but they exist. Do your research, do your due diligence. Some therapists, are better trained than others. But the point is help exists. So happiness is a choice, but then follow it up by making it a practice and saying, what am I doing? And in the last chapter in the book, Practicing Healthy Habits, I share something called the 4 M's of mental health. And for me, those are my 4 science-backed habits and ways that I practice happiness and joy in my life every day. And I recommend it to all my patients. And it's movement, mindfulness, mastery, and meaningful engagement. So these are 4 things I encourage people to look at. But, movement is any form of exercise, and mastery is doing the thing, cultivating a hobby that is just for you, the flow state that we were talking about. And the meaningful engagement is going deep, so I'm a big believer in micro connections. So like the elevator conversation, the water coolers, but then going deep and sharing and being vulnerable. So I encourage people to, look at this entire arc. It's a program, it's not a book, it's a program, and it's a way of life and a philosophy. But there's so much science behind why optimists are richer. They're happier. They live longer. They have less heart disease, less heart attacks. They're just successful in every aspect of their life because of this mindset that they adopt and that they practice.
Wow. Dr. Sue Varma, thank you so much for being on Flirtations today. Just a dream collaboration, as this was hearing that first interview you did, or a interview you did, for me, your first one on the bright side over a year ago, getting the book Practical Optimism, following you, and now chatting with you today. This was the mindset shift for me. Is happiness a choice? Happiness is a practice. Right?
Thank you.
And that's ultimately what it really is.
Yeah.
And because I've struggled with depression my entire life and just wanted to feel better, and, often ask myself, why is it not working? Right? Why am I not feeling better yet? And so for all the flirties listening, if you're having that experience right now, reflect back on where you were a year ago. I bet you have made significant strides. I bet you have prioritized daily habits and practices that have gotten you to where you are today. And a year from now is only going to be even better.
Totally. I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much. What a great conversation.
This has been, I'm going to send all the flirties your way. Just the final thing here, website, Instagram, socials, book. Yes, plug it all. Of course, I'll have all the links in the show notes below as well.
Yes, no, I would love to stay in touch with folks on Instagram. It's the word Dr. Sue Varma, the word DOCTOR Sue Varma, and my website is the same thing, drsuvarma.com. But I would love to stay in touch with people and get the book. And, you know, when I wrote it, I was given a book when I was a teenager. It was called Wherever You Go, There You Are by John Kabat-Zinn. And it changed my life, and I kept it by my bedside. And my hope and goal was that this book will be like a forever companion of yours, that you come back to it, you know, at different stages, different problems, and work it. And, you know, it's a gift. It's a piece of me to you, you know, to the world, because I can't be there physically helping each person, but I want to. Like that's the desire, is to be able to create more joy and alleviate suffering. So that's the purpose. Going back to your initial question, that is my purpose, I feel like.
Wow, we've really come full circle. I'll have all those links in the show notes below. And I love the cover as well, because I'm a beach boy and I feel like I'm at the beach.
Yes.
Right? That's a happy place for me. So I appreciate that as well.
Yes. That's why we did it. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Sue Varma, for being on Flirtations today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Flirties, that's a wrap on this episode of Flirtations, the Practical Optimism episode of the program with the amazing Dr. Sue Varma. Oh my God, y'all. Back when I was first listening to that interview that Dr. Varma did on the Brightside podcast that we briefly mentioned in this episode of Flirtations, I was just going through it. I remember I was at the gym. This was before Flirtations was even a thing, thinking about, can I do this? Should I do this? Could I do this? Would I do this? And just struggling, just really having this thought in my head of that happiness is a choice. If it's a choice, then why can I not just choose to be happy? It seems so simple. It seems so straightforward. And what I needed to hear, what I needed to change and shift in my own mind is that happiness is a practice. It's a practice. And when I came at it with that point of view, with that perspective, all of a sudden, happiness became something that seemed attainable. It seemed like something I could do, because it became about so much more than just achieving this state of being, this feeling. It became about finding fulfillment and connection within myself, about exploring fulfillment and connection with others in all of my relationships, about seeing what would happen with if I flirted with the possible, right, of pursuing this dream. Yes, thank you, Dr. Sue Varma. Lots of links in the show notes below for this episode to follow Dr. Varma. Her website is there, the book, Practical Optimism. If you don't already have it, you should probably definitely get it. Just keep it by your bedside on your bookshelf. You won't regret it. All right. Thank you, Flirties. Thank you so much for being here, for tuning in, for listening. I so appreciate you giving this good old show we call Flirtations a listen, a stream. Please rate, review, subscribe to the show. If you haven't already, share this episode or another favorite episode of Flirtations with a friend, a family member, a coworker, a neighbor, someone you want to share some BFE, big flirt energy with. And that's going to do it for me, Benjamin, the flirt coach, and Gay Libra here at Flirt Headquarters, signing off officially flirty. Happy flirting.